Welcome, everybody. This session is going to be negotiation tips, but not so much focusing on the negotiating tips. We're going to talk about a few that I'm going to throw out. And then Donna is going to take each of those tips and tell us how the brain functions, why those tips work, why we use the tips. It's really fascinating. So I hope you enjoy it. I just want to set your expectations so that we're not going to have any amount of time to talk about how to negotiate generally. But let's start out with the first one, which is something you know, but you don't do. All right. So this is the discipline of preparation. The fact that you cannot negotiate anything unless you've really thought it out and gone that extra step to make 10 or 12 or 15 calls for any negotiation to figure out the background of what you're negotiating. You want to know, right, what that person is or what the other side is, who's going to be at the table negotiating on the other side, and who is the principal, and why are they negotiating with you? Do they need the money? Do they not need the money? Do they want to grow their business? Do they want to expand a particular area of the business, or is there a deadline involved? And if there's a deadline, you certainly can use that to your advantage one way or the other in negotiation. You want to figure out, so what's the context? What kind of company is this? What kind of business is it? And what's the scenario if you're negotiating with that 17-year-old? All right, you need to be even to plan then. What has been the past? How have you negotiated with that person in the past? What's been the most effective? So to go into a negotiation without giving not just thought, but calling the competitors of that, of the company on the other side to see if you can figure out what's happening in the market. And this is not necessarily to be win-win or aggressive, no matter what how you term your negotiating style, and is to give you the opportunity to change that style, but also to give you the opportunity to be listening and seeing what the other side needs, right, so that you can begin to prepare for it. But who has the authority? One of the most important things that you're going to need to be talking about in preparation. You don't want to be in a situation where you didn't ask or where you don't know, so you don't know that you're going to get the end of the negotiation and find out that the person on the other side doesn't really have the authority to do the deal. Oh, I'm sorry, I have to take it back to my president, or the board needs to approve, or, and sometimes that's a ploy, sometimes that's serious. Right? But you better figure that out up front to some extent the best you can. And so Donna has some thoughts on preparation.
Yes. So visualization should be a part of your preparation. And the reason why you want to do that is because the brain doesn't know the difference between visualization and it actually happening. What happens is the areas of the brain that would light up if you are actually doing it still light up when you visualize. So the more you practice that, it's like you're really doing it over and over and over, and your brain buys into it. So if you want to be confident and you want to feel powerful and feel like you're really able to advocate for yourself, you have to see it in your mind first in order to be able to do it. And this is why Olympic athletes and professional athletes do this mental rehearsal and train over and over, because you need both the muscle memory and the brain memory in order to excel. One of the reasons this works is because you are activating the reticular activating system in the brain. So this is a group of neurons that go up the brainstem and then expand out in the brain. And it's really the gateway between what is in your subconscious and what is in your consciousness. So the majority of what we know, of what we pick up, is in our subconscious. And if we want to bring it into our consciousness, we have to practice it so that the reticular activating system will kind of let it through. And a great example of this is kind of that car analogy, where, you decide you're looking for a car, and maybe you decide, I'm finally going to buy that Audi TT. It's so cute. And suddenly you see it everywhere on the road, right? We've all had that experience. And it's not because suddenly everyone's buying them. It's because suddenly you're noticing them. It's surpassed that reticular activating system. The key when you visualize is to be very specific. You want to use all of your senses in order to make it very real. So when you're imagining it, imagining the smell of your perfume or your hair conditioner, imagine what you're wearing and what that feels like on your body. You want to imagine it in as much detail as possible. You want to bring the emotion into it, so that feeling of confidence. And then frequency. You want to practice as much as you can before the actual event. Another thing about preparation is the opposite, right? Procrastination. And something a lot of us do, especially I bet a lot of people on this call are high achievers. And ironically, a lot of high achievers procrastinate because procrastination is actually an emotional issue and not a time management issue. And it's really about fear of making mistakes, fear of failure, fear of not doing it right, or uncertainty. And what happens in procrastination is your amygdala, which is the fear and emotional center of the brain, is fighting with your frontal lobe, which is the planning and organization and kind of the tidiness, right, of the brain. And the amygdala only takes 1/32nd of a second to fire, whereas your logical brain takes 3 full seconds to fire. So you're in this competition where the fear gets triggered first. Okay, so the visualization is one of the things that will help with that, to keep practicing, even practicing like visualizing you doing that preparation. Also, they found in a study that 8 weeks of mindfulness meditation really reduced procrastination, because what it did was it shrunk down the amygdala. And that's pretty powerful. Imagine that just in 8 weeks, we meditate and we can shrink the size of our amygdala, which we found that in procrastinators, the amygdala is larger, and also the interconnectivity is much more sensitive. It's much stronger. So it's a way to rewire our brain to procrastinate less. And then the other piece of that is to really break it all down into smaller chunks and make sure to reward yourself after every chunk. Most high achievers skip their rewards. They don't savor and celebrate. And what you're doing is you're robbing yourself of that hit of dopamine, which is that feel-good transmitter, or it's part of our reward circuit. And then you don't get the dopamine, and then you don't get that reward. So you can't condition yourself that when I actually work on this, I feel good. So you really want to pair those things together with celebration.
So that's great. I mean, what you're going to be doing is you're going to make sure that I'm not procrastinating, right? And the first thing I'm going to do, all right, is to use that visualization technique to bring myself into the room where, I want to be after the negotiation is over, right? So you have to prepare an agenda. It's, no procrastinating. You need to sit down and write out your objectives. What is it that you want? If you're negotiating your employment agreement, of course, we talked about the fact that it's not just salary, it's benefit and it's title, and it's whether there's relocation, and it's a whole, then exit. I mean, we want to negotiate the separation when we walk into an employment agreement before you start it all, that prenuptial side of things that you have to get done. And so it's a very specific agenda. And you're plotting out when you want to bring up the issues. So good negotiators decide based on what they found out from who's on the other side, whether that person is a screamer or a collaborator, whether that person can be trusted, or whether you have confidence in the way in which the negotiation is going to go. Try and control your agenda to figure out, is it the small things that you build up the yes, yes, yes to, that you can build up a positive negotiation and then go to the large things? So you want to just jump right in and begin negotiating the tougher things, because if you negotiate those tougher issues and it goes, the rest of it just falls into place. And if you're not going to be able to take care of those big issues, then maybe you don't want to bother with the rest of it, depending on how desperate your need is for this negotiation to go your way. But an agenda is absolute, an agenda that changes rapidly during the negotiation. So number one, if somebody calls you and you're in the middle of the negotiation and they surprise you with, I want to talk to you about something, you're about to say to them, what? I'll talk to you right now. No, you don't have an agenda there for that phone call. That agenda moves with the negotiation. every time you're in contact or going to a meeting or with a telephone call. And we aren't negotiating by email. That's for certain, because there's a reflex no to an email. You're never negotiating by email if you have the chance to, to control that. So when somebody calls you, you're going to say, I'll talk to you in 15 minutes. How about if I talk to you in a half an hour, tomorrow, whatever it is, but you're not going to take that call. Can't talk to you, just wanted to let you know I got your message, be back to you. You then write out your agenda. What is it that you want to accomplish after you hang up that phone?
And this is also where your personal values and your non-negotiables come in as well. You really want to walk into that room knowing what's important to you. And it's not always the dollars or the title, right? There are things like our work-life balance. There are things like certain funds. There are different flexibility is another one, right? There are different things that really matter to us. So sitting down and knowing what you value, even ranking those values so you know what's most important, what's least important, and knowing your bottom line, those non-negotiables. I can't do this if I can't pick up my kid on Mondays because that's the most important day that I'm there because they have this or that. Whatever it is, you really need to walk in knowing that. And as far as the brain science goes for that, this is where dopamine kicks in again, because our values are actually tied to the reward circuit in our brain and the nucleus accumbens, which is in the brain right near the amygdala. And that makes us either approach something or avoid something. And so when we're looking at our values, you'll know that it's a feel-good feeling. And so one of the things you can do is, like Laurel is saying with your agenda, like imagine different scenarios and notice how they feel in your body when you imagine them. Because your body is going to tell you, that gut feeling kind of like, I'm okay with this or I'm not okay with this. And sometimes that's a great way to get yourself out of the way of overthinking something, because either it feels good or it doesn't. And you'll know kind of where your bottom line is there.
When you're negotiating, you want to know how it's going. You want to know how you're going to get there, and you want to know whether you should walk, right? So what you're going to be doing is just determining at every moment of the negotiation, again, just like your agenda, this is going to move the best alternative to the deal that's on the table at the moment, the best alternative to the deal that's not there at all yet, right? Which would be you're walking into a negotiation and you have your agenda and your objectives. You still need to know how you're going to get to those objectives, what are the different ways, and what is the very best alternative that you're walking into. What would you love to see? That's your visualization. That's your agenda. Now you walk in and all of a sudden the other side says, that's not going to happen, but how about A, B, and C? And you're going to be able to say, here's why, and proceed to support your agenda. But there's only one best alternative, and we all usually negotiate with 4 or 5 alternatives in mind. They're in your mind, they're running around, and you're saying, all right, my favorite example, the example of your apartment. You're leasing a 1-bedroom apartment, your lease is up, your landlord says, I'm increasing your rate, all right? And the alternatives are make them decorate, okay? Move to the penthouse that's a 2-bedroom apartment, move across the street and buy a co-op or a condominium, go back into the 1-bedroom and negotiate the best deal and save a whole bunch of money, or take your dog to the suburbs and negotiate for a townhouse and buy. There are 1,000 more permutations of that in your mind, but you can't negotiate from that. The discipline is you must focus on what is best for you at that moment. This deal, the offer from that landlord, against what you want. If your best deal is the 2-bedroom apartment in the same building, all right, you just go back and say to him, you know what, I don't want to renew this lease. All right, I want the 2-bedroom and here's what I'm willing to pay. Now you're negotiating something you want. And if what he comes back or she comes back with is so expensive that you're saying to them, my best alternative under that circumstance is to go across the street and rent a 2-bedroom in another building, that's your best alternative. So you're saying to landlord, you know what? I went across the street and this is the deal. And so I think my best alternative is just to go across the street at the moment. He or she will change their deal, or you will end up going across the street, having already priced that unit, or you're going to say to yourself, this doesn't make any sense to me. All right. Why would I move? So why don't I just move to that townhouse, outside the city and get my dog a backyard or something of that nature. So though we could spend a huge amount of time, all right, when we're talking about the question that we always get, right? When do I walk? Which I would ordinarily do at the end, but when do I walk? I walk when the best alternative is not to take the deal. Now, there are times when I need this deal more than anything. Or I have a deadline and I've got to get it done. All right. But there are also times when you have to step back after getting swept into the pattern of negotiation, swept away. All right. You have to step back and say, what is, like Donna says, what's my gut tell me? My gut says, this is not the deal I want. My gut says, walk, the best alternative. Not every negotiation ends in an agreement. So there's a piece of this that Donna can talk to you about that brain and when you're walking and what best alternative is.
Right. If you accept a deal that really is not in your best interest, that's not in alignment with your values and your non-negotiables, you are going to experience cognitive dissonance. You are not going to feel in alignment, and you're going to end up ruminating about it and overthinking it. And you're really going to end up in a place of regret. So I had a mentor of mine that used to say to me, it's either a hell yes or a hell no. And so really remembering that. And as Laurel said, these approaches, when you are very clear on what you want, what your limits are, what your alternatives are, you really negotiate from that sense of power. You will hold yourself differently, you will speak differently, and you'll just have that sense of empowerment that even if you choose to walk away, you won't feel like it was a failure. You'll feel like I stayed in my power and I chose to walk.
So one important part of this is that walking out is a ploy as well. All right. We know that we can walk out of a negotiation, but you cannot walk out of a negotiation ever using that ploy and still need to be in the negotiation. So if you absolutely need to be there, walking out is a ploy you do not use because you can't walk back. All right. So if you're walking out hoping that the other side will come back to you, that's something else because you're saying this current deal is hell no. Love it, Donna. All right. This current deal is hell no. But if I walk out, they might come back. That's one thing. But if you're walking out to think that they're going to get you because you have told them that the deal is over and they're going to continue to negotiate, if there's something about this deal that's a must, all right, that's not a ploy you're going to use. But let's talk for a second about why we women, in general, don't like to negotiate. So we don't like to negotiate because we love building relationships. It's in our brain. Donna's going to explain, all right? But with knowing that we love to build a relationship, we hate disagreement, and negotiation is what, women? All right, you're in disagreement. You're in a time of disagreement. Otherwise, you're not negotiating, right? You're in agreement. And so we know that negotiation always is a product of disagreement. We're uncomfortable with that. We're uncomfortable with maybe destroying or not having somebody like us. All right, there's a feeling of a lack of confidence somewhere along the line. We were taught to manipulate at home rather than to negotiate. All right, sometimes we're taught not to be aggressive and smile and be nice. All of the instructions that have been coming into us, all right, leave us with this feeling that we might not have the tools to fight. And so I'm going to give you 2 tools that I use, and then I want to hear about what my brain is doing to make me feel uncomfortable when I'm in disagreement. And by the way, women, it's not unusual to fear disagreement, to fear negotiation, just like it's not unusual to fear public speaking. All right. Lots of people who you see are very comfortable speaking publicly still have a fear. right? They are feeling a little uncomfortable. That fear of failure is still around. So don't think that somebody who looks smooth through life has a balanced life, and don't think that they aren't. How do they do that all the time? They just don't seem to have any fear at all in going forward. All right, ready? This is where I bare my soul to you. I always have a fight song, right? My favorite song that I'm singing to myself as I'm going into a meeting where I want to get my energy level up and prepared is Santana's Black Magic Woman. That's me. Okay, and so I'm singing that. Choose anything you want as long as it's upbeat. All right, and I always say, please don't choose a fight song to get that man back. All right, that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about success and winning, and it has nothing to do with the guy or the partner. I bring that in, all right, and I have two dogs sitting next to me all the time. Right? They are enormous, right? They are my huge Great Danes with a horrible personality, and they are drooling, and they have teeth, and they are pulling at their leash. Okay, but at the moment, my dogs are sitting there right now, and they're very, very quiet. There's nothing for them to be concerned about. We're negotiating and collaborating and getting there. But if I have to change like a chameleon, all right, and work into another 0 to 60, those dogs have reared up on either side of me, and they are there to tell the other side that they're not going to take me on. All right. So, Donna, why does my brain do that to me? Why can't I just rationalize the fact that I'm successful in every negotiation and the next one will be even more successful? What's going on inside of my head?
Right. So women, as we all know, we generally are the caretakers, right? We're the caretakers, the nurturers, but that goes well beyond social concepts. We're actually biologically geared that way. And if you look at evolutionary psychology, it'll show that evolution is so slow, right? So we, through our hormones and through our neurotransmitters, are actually biologically wired to be more nurturing, more compatible. We don't like that discomfort. We want to take care of other people. We emit oxytocin, which allows us to do that. It's the bonding hormone that we actually give off during labor and when we're nursing our infants. So you have this push-pull again, right? So you've got testosterone, which we don't have as much as men, right? So they have the testosterone, which brings the confidence and the willingness to be more assertive or even aggressive, to stand in that power, right? So we're not chemically the same to have that same playing field for the fight, essentially. And then when you add in that discomfort and that fear, we also trigger cortisol, which is our stress hormone. So the things that we need to do beforehand are the things like Laurel's fight song that help shift those chemicals a bit in our body. And one of the things is power posing. If you're familiar with Amy Cuddy's work at all, to power pose before you go into an interview or before you go into a negotiation, any negotiation. So if you're not familiar with it, one of the common ones is called Wonder Woman pose, where you make fists and put them on your hips and stand with your feet apart. But the idea really is any big pose. So anything where your arms are out, it could be leaning on your desk. It can be arms behind your head with feet up on the desk. But it's this like, I am going to take up space. And what this does is actually trigger the chemicals in your body. It's a neurofeedback loop. So you're saying to your body, I feel strong, and your body responds with feeling strong and releasing more testosterone and lowering your cortisol.
Power pose also, to me, all right, just walking into the room, choosing my seat, okay, and making certain, all right, that I have lots of space. I'll take 2 seats up, right, always. Right, with whatever I want. It is a power pose. Then I can be very gracious and move in if there are going to be a lot of people at the table. But generally, if you're negotiating, there are not that many people. So just get there, decide what seat you want and whose eyes are going to be in the sunshine, and just spread it out and be very comfortable doing it. So who is it that does the job as well as you want to see it? Who do you trust to do something difficult, something complicated, something scary, who do you trust? I'm going to tell you what your answer is. You trust yourself, right? 100%. You're trusting yourself to do it the best you can. But in this case, okay, you have to realize that the reason you trust yourself is you know your capabilities. So if you can make yourself seem like the other side, if you can change the pace of your discussion, the pace of your words, you always will choose your words very carefully, because if you don't do that, you're not giving the good signals out that you want about how to settle this with you. You want to be certain that you're slowing it up also, because that person on the other side needs to absorb what you're saying. But you also want to slow that up to build a relationship. If you are like them, they will trust you. If they trust you, they will make a deal with you. If you scare them, if you give off vibes of not being competent or not being trustworthy, then nobody's going to want to make a deal with you. And this is all at a subconscious level. Personal space. Now, we're not in a room, all right? We are obviously spaced and negotiating by video. That's a different conversation, but you're with somebody personally, and you don't have to be 6 feet apart. All right, you are going to make certain that if they are the kind of person, and you've been able to test it by just walking up to them, right, and seeing if they back up, all right, or if they move in. So that's the same thing for negotiating by video. If I want personal space, you're going to find me back here, just unconsciously. It's not so much that I'm going to show you that I'm so relaxed, I don't care about what you're saying. It's that I'm used to having more space. But if you're like me and you have body language, and you're warm and you want to convey that, then you're going to watch your personal space. You're not going to watch the words you use. If this person is swearing a lot, you can feel a little bit more comfortable about the language you use, or you can simply tone it all down or rise it all up. All right. So if they are a loudspeaker or nasty or something at that level, we want to talk about it. So Donna, why?
Well, one of the reasons this works is because of mirror neurons in the brain. And so with mirror neurons, we are likely to, on a subconscious level, mimic the other person. And what it is it's becoming, really becoming one with them. And it's a way of showing unity and agreement. And so when we're in agreement with someone, our nervous systems will pair up, and you will start breathing at the same rate, and your heartbeat will be at the same rate. And this is something that you can do consciously as well. Like Laurel said, leaning in, paying attention, matching their energy, if they're a really low energy person or a high energy person, getting a sense of the room and really listening to the words they use. You want to listen for the messages that are between the lines. What are they saying that they really want? But this is all triggered by those mirror neurons, because we are social animals and we want to be compatible. And again, you have that oxytocin kicking in as well to form that bond. And the more bonded you are, the more likely you are to get what you want.
So you've segued into listening as one of the most important skills. We listen. We think we listen, but most of us do not. So listening also is a learned activity. It is a discipline. Don't think just because you're listening to us that you're actually listening, but you seem to be, entranced with what we have to say, because it's very important to you. But even if you're talking to somebody and it's not that important to you, it's eye contact. It's listening so that you can repeat what they're saying, that you are listening for the words they use to give you a sense of where they are in this discussion. How passionate are they about the topic? If it's in negotiation, it's how passionate and important this particular topic is to them, right? And how can you solve it? But what you're listening is you're not thinking about what you're saying next. You are focusing entirely on what they are saying, asking questions, demonstrating curiosity, and listening again to their responses. And the game you play with yourself is, could you repeat what they had to say? I mean, you're really listening to what they're saying and why they're saying it. If you're not doing that, you're not going to be negotiating, because you're not going to be able to figure out what's the most important thing to them. And if that happens to be pretty important to you, guess what? All right, there might be a deal there very fast. But if it's not important to you, after you have absorbed, all right, what you have learned from listening, You are then going to take the space. It could be silence. There's nothing wrong with silence, all right? It could be silence while you're thinking about the manner in which you want to reply. There's nothing wrong with you just taking a minute to just think about what you've heard. And you could say, I need to absorb what you just said to me, because I think there's some items in here that we can work with. Now, silence is also one of the very best negotiating ploys.
And one we don't use enough of, but I want to be conscious of
that lady just interrupted me.
I did.
Right? And silence is very, very uncomfortable. So when I'm using silence, you can practice with yourself. Give yourself 30 seconds to be silent, 30 seconds that are counted in real long seconds. You can even do it for a minute so that you understand how long a minute is, and it's only a minute. How effective, because the first person to jump in is giving something away. All right, women often respond to silence by saying, well, if you don't like that deal, we could do something else. So why do we care about silence, Donna? And then I think we have to close.
We are often uncomfortable with silence because we don't want to make the other person uncomfortable. Again, a part of that caretaking and not just wanting to fix the situation. But when we do break the silence first, we do give away our power. So we really do want to be okay with being uncomfortable, whether that's ourselves or someone else. And that goes back to what Laurel said about, like, no matter how many times you do public speaking, you may still feel fear. That's okay. It's getting comfortable with uncomfortable feelings.
So practice silence. You can't do that without practicing it, because it is not a funny game. All right. If you're practicing silence, you've got your default expression on that you should also be practicing. What is your pleasant, not overly cute expression? All right. That's the one thing. And interruption, which I just did and Donna did to me, right? That interruption is healthy for you to see in purpose, because it is a negotiating tool that men use. Not only do they use it subconsciously, because men interrupt to control a conversation, you are interrupting to control a conversation, and often interrupting to see if we can't lose focus on what we're talking about and move to a different topic, right? To change the tenor or change the subject. You are interrupting. It is a negotiation ploy. If somebody does that to you, you have several choices. You can sit back and let them interrupt and listen to where they wanted to go, right? Or you can say, let me finish my sentence. I'm getting to the end. You can wait a second, all right? But know that interruption is also something you can use to redirect the conversation.
I'll just add quickly that really, I believe that it comes down to those values and your priorities that let you know when to walk. And doing that visualization of imagining the different scenarios and how they feel in your body can really help you know ahead of time what it is that hell no, essentially.
And if you've walked or you're about to walk from a good negotiation, you have an agreement. Before you paper that agreement or before you even walk out the door, I want to see that negotiation and your agreement bulleted, all right? And with both of you signing a little, to be confirmed in writing or something, so that you're not starting from scratch and you don't have what I call the nibbler come back and say, well, yeah, that's fine with me, but please, all right, can we change the deadline? Can we deliver earlier? You never want to change your agreement without something in return. So at least confirm what your deal is before you walk out the door, and slap the nibbler.
Wonderful tips, Laura and Donna. Thank you very much for helping us really bring this series full circle and for sharing your expertise with us this afternoon. I've read some research in preparation for this program that women often excel at negotiating for others, but need to step up our game for ourselves. So we hope that this was really helpful to all of you and that you bring your true and authentic selves to that negotiation.